So today we're going to be making one of my favorite dishes of all time, Chicken Parmesan. And as with a lot of classic dishes, unfortunately there are a lot of underwhelming versions of Chicken Parmesan out there, but today I'm going to show you how to do it right. So what do you say we get to it? So let's start by getting our tomato sauce ready, and for that we're going to cut one medium baseball-sized onion into a medium dice, or roughly 1/2 inch squares, but they don't have to be perfect, just somewhere in the neighborhood will work. Then we're going to load them into a sauce pot and place it over a burner set to medium heat along with a tablespoon of olive oil and a pinch of salt, and these need to soften up for about 5 minutes, so keep an eye on them, stir them up every once in a while, and while that's going on, let's get our garlic ready. We're going to use 3 to 4 garlic cloves here, and start by smashing them with the side of your knife to break loose the outer peel, and run your knife through the garlic until you get it fairly well minced up. And once we get to that point, we can go back over to the stove top to see that the onions have softened up a little and they're starting to brown up around the edges. So go ahead and toss in the garlic along with 1 teaspoon of red chili flakes. This will only take about a minute to soften the garlic up and lightly toast the chili flakes, so don't walk away from the pot just yet. You can see now that we're getting a little bit of browning in the bottom of the pot, so we can go ahead and stir in 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and continue to cook and stir for another minute or two, or until the paste and the bottom of the pot take on a somewhat rust-looking color. It is important in these early stages to stir it frequently to prevent scorching, and once the bottom of your pot looks somewhat like what you see here, go ahead and add 1 28-ounce can of pureed tomatoes along with 1 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes, and we're also going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt and oregano and 3/4 of a teaspoon of basil. Give the whole thing a stir, set the heat between low and medium, and we're going for a gentle simmer here. Okay, this sauce has to simmer now for about 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and get our chicken ready. So normally when it comes to chicken parmesan, the go-to meat is usually chicken breast, but I'm gonna go with chicken thighs here. These are boneless, skinless chicken thighs. These are a lot less likely to dry out and they have a lot more flavor. And they're cheaper, so let's go ahead and get these ready. So normally when you prepare the chicken breast meat for this, you pound it out thin prior to breading it up. But you can see here with the thigh meat, there's some added challenges here because there's a bunch of smaller muscles in there that are attached to this that if you get too crazy with this, they'll just sort of tear off. So you have to be careful with this. So I've laid out a few layers of plastic wrap, so go ahead and place the chicken inside, folding over the outer edges to enclose the chicken, and I'm going to use this saute pan to apply gentle pressure onto the chicken to lightly flatten it. We're looking to create a uniform thickness here, so a pan like this or even a sheet tray will evenly distribute pressure, and if you're careful it won't tear or mangle up the chicken pieces. You might break off a small piece here or there, but that's not a big deal. Now once you're done flattening the chicken, make sure to season the pieces with salt and pepper, because after we bread them, we won't be able to get the seasoning to the inside of the chicken. Okay, the chicken's ready to be breaded up now, and we're going to be using something called the standard breading procedure, which is a 3-step process. The first step is flour, the second step is egg wash, and finally breadcrumbs. This is commonly used in pan frying and deep frying. So I've got my station set up here, and we're going to start by dredging the chicken with the flour, shaking off the excess before placing it into the egg wash to coat it with that mixture before the final step, which is to coat it with the breadcrumbs. And that piece is now ready to go, and repeat this process for however many pieces you intend on breading up. And another thing you'll notice here is that I've set up the flour and the breadcrumbs on the same side, and the purpose for that is to sort of utilize a wet hand, dry hand technique. This is a very important detail, especially if you intend on breading a lot of pieces of chicken. For now though, these pieces are ready to take over to the stove top to fry them up. I should mention that these can be frozen, but don't just toss them into a freezer bag just like this, because they'll stick to each other and morph into some big ass clump of shit. Rather, lay out a sheet tray and separate them onto a sheet of parchment paper, and then once they're frozen, then you can put them into the freezer bag and pull them out one by one. You can freeze the sauce as well, so if you take the steps to freeze the chicken and the sauce, you've made a relatively easy weeknight recipe out of something that would be normally a little bit more complicated. Okay, to get these things going, place a saute pan over medium heat and add a moderate amount of oil to the pan. You want the height of the oil to come about halfway up the side of the chicken. And when that heats up, go ahead and add a few pieces of chicken to the pan, and you're not looking for the oil to be smoking or a strong sizzling sound like you would expect for sauteing. Pan frying utilizes moderate heat, and the goal here is to create a gradual, even browning across the surface of the breading. And I've also got a pot of water rolling to cook our pasta, so once that reaches a boil, go ahead and add your pasta. Now going back to the chicken, chicken, once you start seeing a little browning around the edges, go ahead and flip the pieces over to brown up the other side. And these are going to be flipped back and forth a few times during this process, and I found that doing it that way does create the most evenly golden brown surface on both sides. Now once you do get them evenly browned up on both sides, lay out a sheet tray and line it with a cooling rack, and place the chicken pieces onto the rack and top them with cheese. And this is the part of the process where most recipes take a nosedive into soggy ass mediocre chicken parmesan. They apply the sauce first, which allows for the water in the sauce to ruin the crispy surface you just worked hard to achieve. But the good thing is that viewers of this channel like yourself won't have to put up with any of that nonsense, because we're going to make this thing right. I should mention that the cheese I'm using here is a mixture of about 4 parts mozzarella to 1 part Parmesan, and once you do have these things topped off, toss them under the broiler and keep an eye on them until the cheese browns up, which should take about 5 minutes. Okay, so we've got the chicken in the oven and the pasta's rolling, so this would normally be the part of the video where I would go into some of the history behind this dish, but honestly it was a little bit complicated figuring that out, and I still don't really know what it is. A lot of sources pointed to New York and Brooklyn in particular, but I also found out this dish is very popular in Australia, where you have breaded chicken topped with cheese and browned under a broiler, but that's served with salad and fried potatoes. Now one thing I am pretty sure of though is that this dish is not Italian. Now the name Chicken Parmesan is close to a very well-known dish in Italy known as eggplant parmesan, but there are probably a lot more differences than there are similarities to this. First off, the eggplant isn't pan-fried, it is cooked to soften it up in olive oil, but then it's layered with tomatoes and cheese and then baked, but that probably resembles more something you know as a lasagna than it does what we know as chicken parmesan. So if you do happen to be a food nerd kind of like me, and you do happen to know the history behind chicken parmesan, I'd love to know it, and leave me the links in the comments or whatever you know about it, because I'm curious to know. But for now, let's get back to making this dish. Okay, to finish this thing off, while the chicken is in the oven, toss together some sauce with a little bit of the pasta, making any final seasoning adjustments while you're at it. And when the cheese on top of the chicken is browned up to your liking, go ahead and take it out of the oven and let's get this whole thing plated up. Start by loading up a plate of your choosing with the pasta mixture, cleaning up any blemishes along the way, nestle a piece of chicken on top of the pasta, and finally garnish with a few basil leaves. And with that, we've reached the end of the video, so thanks for tuning in and see you next time.